Welcome to this deep dive for the English effect. I'm so glad you're joining us today because, honestly, we've been talking about this topic behind the scenes, and it's something I just notice all the time now.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
Yeah, so whether you are, prepping for a big tech meeting or you're just insanely curious about where the world is heading, this deep dive is going to break down some really complex concepts into, well, accessible, clear language.
And we really need that vocabulary right now.
We do, because our mission today is to explore the moral framework of artificial intelligence. Like, how do we teach machines right from wrong?
Which is funny, right? Because we can't even agree on that ourselves most of the time.
Exactly.
Hmm?
And we've got a fantastic stack of sources to guide us today. We're pulling from a comprehensive overview of AI ethics, a really brilliant MIT news article about a new testing framework, and a couple of transcripts, one on natural language processing and another on child development across different cultures.
Yeah, those transcripts really highlight a surprising connection. I mean, we usually think of AI as this cold, hard math, right? It's just calculators.
Right.
But teaching an AI is actually a lot like raising a child. It absorbs the culture, the language, and unfortunately the flaws of the environment it grows up in.
I love that analogy. It's so true. Oh, and before we really jump in, please remember to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the English Effect channel if you want to keep exploring these kinds of complex ideas with us.
Yes, definitely do that. So I think the best place to start is the very foundation of how AI learns to understand us in the first place, which is through language.
Right, because before it can make, like, a life or death decision driving a car, it has to actually know what we're saying.
Exactly. And that brings us to natural language processing, or NLP.
Sure.
When you speak to Siri or Google Assistant, the machine tokenizes your words.
Tokenizes.
Yeah, it basically chops your sentence into these tiny pieces of data, and then it analyzes the mathematical probability of what those pieces mean together.
Right. But the problem with human language is that it's just so mathematically ambiguous.
Hmm.
Our NLP source highlights this perfectly with lexical ambiguity.
Oh, the tank example?
Yes. If I feed a machine the sentence, the tank was full of water, how does it know if, a military army tank or, a plastic storage tank?
Well, it solves it by looking at adjacent words in its training data. So if it's read millions of sentences where water and tank are next to the word plastic, it makes a mathematical guess.
But syntactic ambiguity is even harder. The source gives this example. Old men and women were taken to a safe place.
Right.
Are the women old too? Like, a human uses cultural intuition for that.
Yeah.
But a machine, it just uses the statistics of whatever data we feed it.
Which begs the really big question, whose data are we feeding it?
Yeah.
The TEDx source on child development points out that human children grow up in wildly diverse cultures, but AI is overwhelmingly trained on data from what they call weird societies.
Weird, spelled W-E-I-R-D, meaning Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic.
Exactly. And those weird societies represent, what, only 12% of the global population?
Yeah, 12%.
But because almost 90% of the internet's training data is in English, the AI assumes this tiny 12% slice of humanity is just the absolute truth of the world.
And that creates a massive issue with bias because it's just looking at historical data.
Yeah.
It develops this unfair preference.
Right.
That unfair preference, that bias means the AI might systematically favor a Western male perspective while totally ignoring the rest of the world.
We actually saw this bias play out in the real world with Amazon a few years ago. They tried to build an AI to filter job resumes, right?
Oh, I read about this.
Yeah, they trained it on 10 years of their own historical hiring data. But because the tech industry has been so male-dominated, the AI mathematically learned that the word women's, like women's chess club, had a negative correlation with getting hired.
Wow.
So it actively penalized female candidates. It didn't decide to be sexist. It just reflected our historical flaws.
If a child repeats a bad word they heard at home, we don't blame the child, we blame the parent. So why are we surprised when AI acts on the prejudices we fed into it?
Exactly. And we see this with dialects, too. Voice recognition systems have way higher error rates for non-native English speakers.
Because it lacks the mathematical weights for those speech patterns. And when it lacks the right data, it just generates misinformation.
Yeah.
It confidently produces false or inaccurate information and spreads it. Like when an AI hallucinates a fake legal case.
Right. It spreads that misinformation as if it were absolute fact.
So we feed it flawed data, and it mathematically predicts its way into producing misinformation. But I gotta say, The scariest part to me isn't what it learns.
What is it?
It's that we don't actually know how it makes its final choices. We feed it data, but the engineers can't tell us how it reaches a conclusion.
Oh yeah, the black box problem.
Right.
As these models grow from millions of parameters to trillions, they become completely opaque.
Opaque meaning you can't see through them.
Right. The decision-making process is totally hidden from view. It's opaque and just not understandable by the human mind.
Which is terrifying in healthcare. If my human doctor gives me a weird diagnosis, I can just sit there and ask why.
Exactly. You can ask what symptoms led them there.
But if an AI does it, it's just a wall of numbers. The reasoning is completely opaque. If it's a hidden process, how can a doctor catch a medical error before someone gets hurt?
Often they can't. It's called automation bias. Humans naturally trust computers. If the system says a tumor is fine, the doctor might just sign off on it. What we desperately need is transparency.
Meaning we need to see clearly inside the system.
Exactly. True transparency. The ability to understand the exact pathway the AI took to make its choice.
But some people say open source AI is the fix for that, right? Like Hugging Face, they open source their code.
Yep.
But does giving people the code actually equal transparency?
Not really. Having the files doesn't mean comprehension. You can look at a billion numbers, but you still won't know why the AI rejected a resume.
Right. And then on the other side, companies like OpenAI have moved to closed systems.
Yeah, they refuse to share the code. They say keeping it locked up stops bad actors from, making bioweapons.
But then independent researchers can't check their work. It feels like a convenient way to protect corporate secrets. And speaking of corporations, let's talk about the cost of getting all this data.
The scraping.
Yes. To build these opaque models, bots are just aggressively scraping the open internet.
But collateral damage is wild. Open knowledge platforms like Wikipedia and Stack Overflow are dealing with massive server strain.
Because the bots are downloading the whole site thousands of times a day.
Just to feed their math.
And this highlights a total failure of alignment.
Alignment.
Yeah, alignment is when the AI's internal goals perfectly match human values and well-being. But when an AI just consumes data and drains an educational nonprofit's budget, the internal goals don't match our values. The alignment is broken.
That's a great way to put it. The AI is optimizing for its own goal, more data, and ignoring the human cost. Which brings us back to that Arizona street in 2018, the Uber crash.
Right, the transition from how AI thinks to who takes the blame. So let's analyze the mechanics of that crash. The software got stuck in a loop, vehicle, bicycle, unknown object.
Yeah, couldn't decide.
But there was a human backup driver in the front seat. The problem was the human trusted the machine. The car was operating as an autonomous system, completely driving on its own without human intervention.
And when an autonomous system, a machine making choices entirely by itself, kills a pedestrian, the legal system just fractures.
Because the physical sensors worked. The radar saw the woman.
But the software failed to understand the sensor data.
Which is wild. Like, if I'm on a passenger train and it crashes, the fault is obvious. The transit company pays.
Right.
But if I'm behind the wheel of a self-driving car and it's driving autonomously while I'm playing a video game, who goes to jail?
The backup driver. The pedestrian.
Or the software engineer in Silicon Valley.
You're hitting on the crisis of liability.
Liability meaning who is legally at fault.
Yes. Our legal system relies on finding a human with bad intent or negligence. But how do you assign liability, that legal fault and financial penalty, when a web of math just fails to classify some pixels?
Finding legal fault is hard, but it gets even darker in the military sector.
Oh, absolutely.
Our sources talk about the U.S. Navy and DARPA, the Asimov program.
Yeah.
They are studying how to put weapons on autonomous robots.
The military calls engaging a target the kill chain. Identify, authorize, execute. Usually a human has to do the authorizing.
But the sources talk about autonomous weapons becoming the Kalashnikovs of tomorrow.
Meaning a swarm of drones could identify and execute targets mathematically, with no human pulling the trigger.
Which shifts the moral burden entirely. We aren't just talking about legal liability anymore. We are talking about accountability.
Right.
Accountability is about who holds the moral responsibility. Who answers for a war crime if no human made the choice?
It's the most urgent debate right now. A glitch in a resume scanner costs a job. A glitch in a weapon costs lives. Holding a commander to accountability, forcing them to bear that moral responsibility is incredibly difficult.
I feel like we've painted a really bleak picture here.
We kind of have.
The data is biased, the networks are opaque black boxes, and nobody knows who has liability. So, how are humans fighting back? How do we code a moral compass?
Well, the traditional way is regulation.
Government rules.
Yeah, regulation means the government creates strict legal rules to control the technology. The EU is doing this with the EU AI Act.
Taking a risk-based approach, right.
Yeah,
So if a software poses a huge risk to society, the regulation kicks in and they just ban it.
that's the theory. But legislation takes years. Software updates take weeks.
The law can't move fast enough.
Exactly. We can't waste for politicians. We need an engineering solution, which is what that MIT news source was about.
Oh, the seed set framework.
Yes, seed set. It's an attempt to force AI models to be ethical. We want machines to be efficient, but being ethical means they have to follow moral principles of right and wrong.
Right.
Ensuring a system is ethical means forcing it to care about human fairness, not just raw speed.
Let's break down how that actually works with the power grid example from the source. Imagine a city uses AI to manage electricity during a winter storm.
Okay.
The software finds a super efficient, low-cost strategy. Technically, the math is perfect.
But maybe it achieves that low cost by shutting down substations in poorer neighborhoods.
Exactly, leaving vulnerable families freezing while wealthy areas stay warm. The AI optimized for the objective metric, saving money.
And ignored the subjective metric fairness.
Right. Before seed set, we wouldn't know until the power went out.
But the MIT researchers did something clever. Instead of humans reviewing thousands of simulations, they used a large language model, an LLM, as a proxy.
Wait, using an LLM to check another AI, isn't that like having a fox guard the henhouse? Like a spell checker that can't read?
I know it sounds crazy, but it works because the engineers write highly specific prompts to force the LLM to roleplay.
Ah,
They tell the LLM, you are a low-income family relying on medical equipment. Evaluate this strategy.
so the LLM simulates the needs of that vulnerable family. It runs thousands of red teaming scenarios to see if they'll lose power.
Exactly. It catches the unknown unknowns. It reveals the moral failures before the AI is ever deployed.
That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Humans use language to define fairness, and the LLM enforces it. It keeps humans in the loop.
It really is the best step we have right now for translating human values into mathematical code.
Well, let's synthesize this whole journey we've taken today. We started with how machines learn language but absorb the biases of weird societies
Then we looked into the opaque black boxes of their decision-making.
and the messy reality of autonomous failures, the legal nightmares of liability and accountability.
And finally, mechanical solutions like SeedSet that demand fairness.
You know, for everyone listening, you are learning a new language to understand these concepts, and the engineers are doing the exact same thing. They are trying to translate morality into code.
The biggest takeaway from all these sources is that tech isn't neutral. It's a mirror of the people who build it.
Absolutely. And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over on your own. If a self-driving car is forced to choose between two lives, who writes the script for that decision? We're currently embedding our deepest moral flaws into autonomous code, yet most people lack the vocabulary to even describe the disaster.
And the only way to prevent it is to understand the language of the machines. So practice using the vocabulary we covered today.
Yes, words like transparency, liability, and alignment. Practice using them in your own conversations. If this deep dive helped clarify these complex ideas, please like this episode, share it with someone who would enjoy the conversation, and subscribe to the English Effect channel for more episodes.
Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.